Trump, Elon, and DOGE are on a mission to cut federal spending by trillions of dollars and make government more efficient. But with all the chaos it's causing, one has to ask, is the cure worse than the wound? This past weekend, Elon announced that federal employees would have to provide email updates on a weekly basis, answering the question, what did you get done this week? And since it's been about a month since DOGE was founded, this is a good opportunity to ask, what did they get done this month? The country seems to be split into two realities. There are people who view what Trump, Elon, and the Department of Government Efficiency are doing as a hostile takeover of American government that's creating daily chaos. And there are people who view this as a revolution of the people taking back control of their government. In this video, we're going to explore why there are two wildly different interpretations of what's going on. I'll also provide my perspective on what's going on and the best way to view this. So first, what's been happening? Launched in early 2025, DOGE is a temporary department under Trump's administration with Elon Musk as a special government employee serving in an advisory capacity. Its mission is to cut spending and streamline federal operations by 2026. So why now? Well, the US is drowning in $36 trillion of debt with a $2 trillion annual deficit. And here's how that impacts your life. One of the reasons that the cost of living has become so high for all Americans is inflation. And inflation is basically just the increase in the price of things. And when the government doesn't have enough money to pay for things, it just prints more money. And when the government prints more dollars, the value of the dollars you already have goes down. And when the value of your dollars goes down, then you need to have more dollars to afford groceries or your mortgage, your car, gas, pretty much everything. So what is our government spending all this money on that's causing it to print more money? Well, here are examples of the most costly things that DOGE revealed. $4.7 trillion where we literally don't know how it was spent because there was a loophole in our Treasury Department's payment system that allowed government employees to make payments without linking those payments to budget line items. $37.5 billion saved by reducing the size of federal workforce. $1.9 billion in funds recovered that the Housing and Urban Development Department simply lost. $1.3 billion sent to dead people. The Pentagon, it spends $900 billion a year, almost $1 trillion, but has failed 7 straight audits and is unable to track 63% of its assets. Now, what comes under particular scrutiny right now is how USAID is spending its $75 billion budget. USAID, or the United States Agency for International Development, is a federal agency responsible for administering civil foreign aid and development assistance. USAID's mission is to advance U.S. national interests and soft power by fostering stability and self-reliance in partner countries. Now, that all sounds nice, but some of the ways in which they've gone about this don't clearly support that goal, such as $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists gender-neutral language, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan, $6 million to support an Egyptian tourism project. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to USAID. USAID financed a social media platform called Zunzunio, which was designed to look like a grassroots Cuban initiative, but secretly was aimed at undermining the Cuban government. So those are the issues that DOGE is tackling. But some critics argue that the cure is actually worse than the disease. And here are their 3 strongest arguments. 1, many of the government agencies being shut down or otherwise limited are providing useful services. For example, in 2023, USAID provided treatment for HIV/AIDS to 20 million people, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. And that saved 25 million lives since 2003. Or they'll point out that child mortality has halved globally since 1990, much thanks to USAID. The second concern is that Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world and someone with billions of dollars in government contracts, has a conflict of interest and too much access to citizens' information. For example, he could influence this administration to reduce the oversight of the FAA, who he's been openly critical of, in order to benefit SpaceX, who relies on FAA for permits. DOGE and Elon also have access to sensitive information on millions of Americans, and there's potential for misuse of that info. This is leading critics to argue that Musk is exercising virtually unchecked power. And the third argument is that all of this is creating chaos and confusion in America. For example, critics point out that the 1,000+ layoffs that Musk's team did to USAID because they deemed it wasteful halted aid deliveries midstream, like famine relief to East Africa. They also argue that Elon's tendency to overstate issues has muddied the waters and undermined trust and complicated governance. For example, on February 11th in the Oval Office, Elon claimed that USAID sent $50 million in condoms to Gaza. But BBC Verify and International Medical Corps disagree, and that's left agency partners and foreign allies questioning U.S. credibility. So now let's evaluate each of those claims. First, the claim that there are useful services being cut. It is fair to say that USAID has created positive results in the world, but it has at the cost to the independence of the nations that we claim to be helping, and often that aid has strings attached. Multiple foreign leaders have been extremely critical of USAID. For example, the president of El Salvador accused USAID of using U.S. tax dollars to fund political opposition groups, particularly those aligned with communist or leftist ideologies that oppose his administration. Or, for example, the late Zimbabwean president Robert Mugabe frequently accused USAID of being a tool of U.S. imperialism, aimed at destabilizing his government, and he also said that it was being used to fund his opposition. Former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta says that African nations receiving this aid are actually just becoming dependent, and he suggested that it's actually time for African nations to take care of their own problems without depending on U.S. taxpayers. And moreover, there are legit concerns that a lot of the money being sent abroad doesn't actually reach the people in those countries and instead is getting siphoned by corrupt governments. So the argument here is we're helping them with one hand while also holding a chain with another and calling that humanitarianism. And there's the additional question of, with billions of dollars in damage done to American taxpayers' property and lives in the US with the disasters in LA or North Carolina, and citizens just getting compensated $770 per person, why are we spending billions of dollars on the citizens of other countries when we don't have enough for Americans here at home? There are undoubtedly many positive things that USAID and other government agencies that DOGE is auditing have done. And it does look like Trump's team is trying to preserve what works that is aligned with their administration's goals of making everything the government does America first. For example, there are reports that the plan for USAID is to make it part of the State Department rather than being an independent agency with minimal oversight. Now let's address the second claim about Elon having unchecked power. The fact is, his power is checked, and it has been getting checked along the way. The courts have already blocked several DOGE overreaches, like when a 25-year-old member of DOGE got into the Treasury system. Congress also has to greenlight any big cuts to make them permanent. And on top of all that, DOGE doesn't have formal authority to unilaterally make any decisions. It's an advisory board, so any formal action requires presidential approval. And although Trump and Elon have been in lockstep up to this point, it might not always be the case. Now, you might not like the fact that a billionaire is influencing public policy, but that's nothing new. 83 billionaires backed Kamala, 52 backed Trump. Billionaires like Bill Gates and George Soros have been quietly influencing public policy forever. And this time, at least the influence is relatively transparent because Elon is constantly posting about it on X, and DOGE has a board showing the cuts that they've made. And the evidence of all that is, well, how much we're currently talking about it. Now, as for concerns about chaos, it's reasonable to say that Elon has a tendency to exaggerate claims on social media or pass along information without rigorously vetting it. And one could also argue that there's a risk of him being overly aggressive with the cuts that he's making. You could even argue that he's creating needless confusion and the messaging could be better. And those are all risks and concerns that must be managed. And it's worth noting that if they cut too much, they can always bring it back. But all that aside, I'm going to ask you a simple question. What's the alternative? In the last 50 years, we've had Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama all try to cut government spending. Everyone but Clinton failed. Clinton created a surplus from 1998 to 2001, which promptly disappeared after that. Every president tells us they're going to fix our out-of-control spending and get our debt under control, but no one has done it. And that's because it's extremely difficult. It requires an elite team, elite technical expertise, immense political capital, an aligned president, Congress, and Supreme Court, and an iron will. It just can't be done from within the system. And change to the system needs to come from without. This kind of extreme change requires disruption. It requires someone from outside the system. It requires someone with a track record of solving the world's hardest problems. And say what you will about Elon, he gets results. SpaceX pioneered reusable rockets, slashing launch costs. With Twitter, he cut 80% of his staff and boosted uptime and usage of X. Tesla made electric vehicles mainstream and created the best-selling car in the world. Starlink brought internet to Ukraine and LA during the fires when no one else could. Chaos is a part of change, and the more change is needed, the more chaos there will be. Now, we can and should keep Elon's actions within legal limits and subject to the approval of our duly elected president. We should absolutely watch out for overzealous cuts. But if we lose things that we need, we can simply bring them back. And it's fair to say that at times, Elon has said things that are incorrect or exaggerated things and made hyperbolic claims about things like condoms going to Gaza. And more rigorous vetting of statements like that would help create unity around the effort of making government more efficient, which we should all be able to rally behind. But to his credit, Elon has acknowledged that by saying some of the things I'll say will be incorrect. And I'd also point out that in this polarized and confusing information media landscape, that's a criticism that you can make of any leader, left or right. Now, will Elon and DOGE create new problems? Yeah, because all evolution is a process of continually replacing older, lower quality problems with newer, higher quality problems. And the government hasn't been serving the people for decades. This might be the last best chance to fix all of that, because new solutions bring new problems, but the new problems in this case are smaller than the old ones. $36 trillion of debt, rampant spending, destabilizing foreign governments with very little transparency, even from our Congress. Now, don't let emotions and outrage cause you to fixate on who is solving the problems rather than the problems they are solving. Now, I hope that this video helped you make sense of what's going on, even if you disagree with my perspective. And for those of you who want to go deeper on these topics or interact with me, my memberships and subscriptions are now live on X, YouTube, and Instagram. By becoming a paying member or subscriber, you'll not only get access to exclusive perks, you also support me as a creator. So if you decide to do that, thanks.